in the Stakeholder Board of the Titan project, which is about enabling transparency in the food supply chain, where we keep an eye on boosting health, sustainability, and food safety. A very short update from my side. The program for today: first, Bert Popping will speak on food fraud. Then Brink will speak on the EU Deforestation Regulation, and then Ciro Borelli will speak on the use of QR codes. Very short for you, we have started a new initiative. I think it's already for 8 weeks ongoing. Every Tuesday around lunchtime, we post what we call Titan Weekly on LinkedIn. And we think this is a very important and interesting source of information that we try to share with you. We divide the topics on the 4 key expertise areas we have in Titan. So you will find information about, let's say, helping consumers to make more healthy and sustainable food choices, about sustainability, about the new innovations, also the food system approach. There are announcements of webinars, maybe conferences for you to go to, where there are some opportunities that different categories. So please tune in every Tuesday around lunchtime on the LinkedIn page from Titan. You find this interesting source of information. Then further on, we have our newsletter. The pictures here you see are from the newsletter in August, but the new newsletter can come out any minute. I know Aphrodite, colleague of mine, is working on it, and it will be sent to all of you. There's a lot of news in here, news from the project, news from partners in the project, and a link to this. We also have a huge PDF with relevant scientific publications, but also with relevant reports that we encourage you to take a look into. We have a specific work packages that is focused on policies, and a number of the reports that we have in this overview are let's say written by organizations that want to support policymakers. And then the next webinar is planned for March 5th, and then we have François Bourdichon as a speaker to talk about food safety. There will be a scientist from ASTI speaking about making it easier for European families to choose healthy and sustainable diets. And then we will have Nikos Manouzelis, the CEO from Agno, speaking about the digital transformation journey of food manufacturers. So I think this is already also a really nice program. And then on the 8th of February, there will be a new stakeholder workshop organized by ILSI. And in that workshop, at least the new pilots will be announced that entered the Titan project from the open call. That's it from my side. Please, when you want to have more information, you are encouraged to go to LinkedIn or the website to get more information. That's it. And then now I would like to give the floor to Bert. So I'll stop sharing, and then Bert can take over.
Yeah, you should be seeing my screen now.
Yes, we do.
If I'm not mistaken. Okay, so first topic is about food fraud, novel detection approaches. Now let's see. I have a number of QR codes for you that take you to most of the links are open access publications. There's one link towards the end that is a book that you would need to pay for. So if you're interested, get your phones out. So what are the issues? What we've been dealing with, and here you see the example of milk, we have not just one adulterant poor commodity, we have a whole bunch, and those are just some of the ones that we know. So for milk, it's addition of water, starch, vegetable fats, formaldehyde, nitrogen-containing compounds, so like urea, melamine, the story that you've probably heard about, addition of bovine milk to sheep or goat milk. And scientists have been very busily developing methods to detect all those different types of fraud. So for water, you can do chiaroscopy. For starch, you can do iodine test. For vegetable fat, you can do fatty acid profile analysis, formaldehyde and nitrogen-containing compounds, LC-MS, so liquid chromatography coupled to mass spectrometry. And for bovine milk or sheep milk, bovine milk addition to sheep or goat milk, you do either PCR, less recommendable, or you do ELISA, which is the method of choice. The problem comes in here really where you have the number of adulterants. This was queried in 2020, and I'll take you through the numbers that I found in 2020. That is the food fraud database that was acquired back then by Discernis. So for extra virgin olive oil, you have 52, orange juice 63, chili powder 72, for beef 78, and for milk you have a whopping 163, and I emphasize the word known adulterants. So the problem is that there are many more, most likely, that we just haven't discovered yet. And what we found, and I was in a meeting in Africa where two people basically said the same things. The criminals are always one step ahead of us. And what we've discovered until now is really only the tip of the iceberg. So what we need to change is really the approach to how we do the testing. And the way it's being done by many scientists and method developers now is to move from targeted methods where you look specifically for, let's say, nitrogen-containing compounds like urea, to a profile analysis of the commodity that should give you some unusual signals in case that there is an adulterant. And we have actually, so that's the first QR code that comes up, that is basically a whole special section in the Journal of AOAC that we published, and the lead article is a paradigm shift from sample to laboratory to sample. Background to that is that one of the obstacles when you deal with food fraud is the time it takes from taking a sample, sending it to the laboratory, then waiting a week if you're lucky, or maybe even longer, to actually get the result back. And by that time, you should have already put the material into production, but you still don't know what the result is. So now there are tools on the market that are allowing you to analyze on the spot, and you don't need to be a scientist. You don't need to have a PhD degree in chemistry or biology in order to interpret the results. So it's quite easy technology. We call that usually a point and shoot technology, but it's definitely a point of need technology. So you use the technology where it's needed. So that can be used for food manufacturer, for example, on site, but also can be used by inspectors. And now, especially in Europe, there are some competent authorities that are moving towards using those portable devices. Here you see one that is a NIR sensor called the Ciro that was developed some years ago by a back then Israeli company. They migrated now to California, so now it's a US company. And the problem that you face is when you look at, for example, if you put yourself in the shoes of an inspector, you have to look at facilities like these, where you have huge quantities, a storage, a warehouse, where you have tons of canisters, or a port. So how do you analyze a large number of samples in a very short time? And this is really the point of shoot device approach. So if you didn't, and you just randomly take a sample, and that's represented by the kind of turquoise bags here that you can see on this part of the slide. But there's one bag of that maybe containing melamine in there, you're unlikely to get that back. If you take 5 bags in 100, you have a 1 in 20 chance. So not very likely that you find this one. So how can that be done? This is really where the point of need sampling, the point and shoot devices come in, where you can acquire information on profiles within seconds or even less than that. And part of the special section that I mentioned previously is the work, for example, of Ernest Tai from Ghana, and also that paper, as it is part of that special section, is open access, and they looked at rice. That was, if you remember, the plastic rice crisis, but also the authentic basmati, non-basmati rice crisis, and they basically build models that allow the differentiation of basmati from non-basmati with basically just the push of a button. So that's one of the nice innovations that you've seen. There was an EU project that developed a sensor for detecting extra virgin olive oil that was non-authentic, either adulterated by other edible oils or by lampant oil. And they used a combination quite smartly with 3 different sensors, so fluorescent sensor, NIR sensor, the visual sensor. And again, that was very successful. That's also part of that special section, so it's open access. The key technologies, I'll take you through the 3 ones that are my personal favorite. There may be others around, but these are my personal favorite. I don't know if you are old enough to remember Star Trek Enterprise, Captain Kirk, and he had a phaser. So that was back in the old days, that was science fiction. Now, if you look at that, that is science reality. So I'm sure the guy who developed those devices here had watched the same series as I when I was a kid. So this is actually an NIR, I think that's Thermo Fisher, if I'm not mistaken, the phaser, and it has the phonetics very similar. So that is a point and shoot device where you can actually shoot through the packaging in order to acquire the profile of a substance. Now, if we're moving to counterfeit alcoholic beverages, you have similar technologies where you can do that. Now I need to see how I move on. So you can either use the analysis of caramel colors. So if you have a basically reference samples where you know how much caramel should be in a high value whiskey, and then you analyze for how much caramel is in there, and it doesn't match, that's already a good indicator of that either being diluted, being adulterated, being faked. Same with the alcohol levels. Now, what is more concerning to me and what has caused many people that have drunken the fake alcohol illness, or in the worst case, even death, was the level of methanol. And there, again, you can use these point and shoot devices, near-infrared spectrometry, so very similar devices to what I've shown you, the phaser of thermal, where you can look at how much methanol, the toxic methanol, a alcoholic drink has, and then you can, if you're lucky, bust the fraudsters. Now, there are some novel technology that enable you to basically know to authenticate a product with based on, for example, the label or a seal. And that is something very recent that was presented at the Rapid Method recently. It's called a physically unclonable function. And it's basically a combination of nanotechnology and artificial intelligence. And it's a development of color on a nano droplet that is very specific to the product. And that allows you to uniquely identify if the product is authentic or fake. And if you have a site and you know that the site produces fake materials and you can manage to get a couple of fingerprints, you might get the suspect. But in many cases, you don't actually get the full fingerprint. You get only a fraction of that. And can that still be useful? So one of the new centers that is being developed by a colleague of mine, by Annemiek from Amsterdam University, she's looking at what is actually in a fingerprint. And you can find sometimes traces of food, bacteria, cosmetics, dust, dead skin cells, nucleated cells. If you have nucleated cells, you can probably get the DNA. But other than that, you can also find sweat, water, proteins, lipid, DNA, drug metabolites, and so on. So you get a lot of information from a fingerprint. And they have been trying to develop a sensor that can, even without having a fingerprint, that would basically be able to, a partial fingerprint that you would be able to use for a database search, you can get other information out there. So you can narrow down the group of suspects. So you could, they're targeting the sex, so if that's a male or female person, the age of the fingerprint, because of course you can say, oh yeah, I was in that store legally, like half a year ago. This is my fingerprint from half a year ago. So basically, by being able to say, well, no, this fingerprint is only 2 days old, they know that you will have been 2 days ago and not 1 year ago in that store. And what they already succeeded, so that the first step to success is basically from the fingerprint, they can actually manage to tell you the blood type. So that's quite astonishing. They're still working on that. So it's a work in progress of University of Amsterdam. And of course, last but not least, we also have combinatorial technologies, and that is really where the Titan project comes in. And most of you will have already heard that we have 2 food safety pilots. One is on extra virgin olive oil, where we combine nanopore and blockchain. So nanopore is a device used, deployed and developed, not developed the device, but developed the DNA targets with that by INL, and blockchain is by Open Food Chain. So we're combining the 2 technologies to be able to track and trace extra virgin olive oil from the trees, so from the olives, to the bottle in the store. So that's pilot 1. The second pilot is about food allergens, where either you receive raw materials that may be contaminated. How can you quickly identify? Again, point and shoot. So far, sensitivity is not there yet. So again, they were using nanopore, so DNA sequencing device, combined with artificial intelligence. So AI Talentum is doing that part. And here we're looking either at raw material reception, but also at the factory layout, because you can have potentially many different places in the factory where contamination occurs. And once you have a map and you repeat that exercise a couple of times, AI can basically calculate where you are at highest risk for having a future contamination. And that would be then a place where you put particularly effort in cleaning or separating the ingredients or whatever. So I think both can help keeping the food safe and healthy. And if you want to read up on this and the technologies that are out there, but also the tools that are available to the food industry, as a paper that several of us that are on the call today have written. So I've seen Paul. So Paul has made a major contribution. John Spink, Steve Gendel, Nivena, Sandra Chavez, Samim, Sharon, and Daniel from Latin America. Again, that is free of charge to download, so that's open access. It's 23 pages, I believe, document. Also, that was part of the ILSI Food Fraud Task Force. And then the last one, unfortunately, that is not, well, not unfortunately, but that is not free of charge. That is a present knowledge of food safety, and it's basically a risk-based approach to the food supply chain. That is you have to buy from Wiley's. So just to give you a quick summary, basically the 3 tools that I presented, near infrared, SCRF, and XRF, are portable technologies. The point of need technologies, often point and shoot devices. They're widely available. They can be used by inspectors and police, but also, of course, by food operators. They do not require experts to operate them. The models will have to be built by experts, but not the operation itself. So they have been used and can be used for food fraud detection. And there are different sources in the literature. Some I have presented for counterfeit alcohol, for adulterated food, but also for identification of suspect characteristics, so sex and blood types. With that, I would like to thank you, and you get 2 more QR codes. On the left is FOCOS Food Consulting Strategically, one of our companies, and the other one is Food Orbit, a food regulatory and compliance company based in Lisbon. And with that, I stop sharing. If I can find how to do that, let me just, that should bring the screen back. And thank you for your attention.
Okay, Bert, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. We have the approach here that we first have the presentations and then time for questions. So please all save your questions. And then after the 3rd presentations, we will have our Q&A session. And now that I give the floor to Blade to talk about a completely different topic. And that's the narrowing of Titan. That we're quite a broad project.
Yeah, can you hear me? Just give me a nod. Yeah, perfect. All right, thanks, Bert. Very, very interesting. I'm going to just share my screen.
And for your information, Blade is talking to us from South Africa, I believe.
Yes, that is why you might see the sun. Is the screen sharing? Can you see the screen?
Not yet, Blade.
No.
That's very strange. It's not sharing. Yeah, I have this problem before. I might have to just jump out the meeting and jump back in. Give me 1 minute, 1 second.
But maybe then we can have Ciro first. to present?
Yes, it's okay for me.
Yeah.
No problem. So I will try to to share my screen now. Okay. Okay. Can you see the screen?
I think we see your screen, but we see ourselves.
See the screen, but you have to switch screens for us to see the slides.
Okay, because okay, let's try in this way. So now it's working.
Yeah. It was there. Yeah, there
that's
it is.
much
Yes.
better.
Okay.
Super.
Okay, nice. So good morning, everyone. I'm sorry for the camera, but it's not working with Teams, and I don't know why. But my name is Ciro Borelli, and I am the CEO at QualityChain. So today I will talk to you about the QR codes and how they can be a great tool to inform and engage your customers. So we all know that communicating information about our product to our consumers is very important. And this is true for every type of information, from nutritional facts to sustainability to traceability data. But what producers want to know is, do consumers actually care about this information? The answer is yes, and a Nielsen study from last year found out that 2 out of 3 shoppers are willing to change from their usual brand to another one that offers more in-depth information about the product. So I guess that it's safe to say that today people want to know more and more about what they are buying and what they're putting on the table. But providing this information can be very hard. First of all, we can fit everything on the label because the product packaging is obviously limited. And sometimes it's not just a matter of space, but it's also hard to provide this information in an easy way to understand for the consumers. But let's face one problem at a time. So now we have this space problem, and we have a lot of information that we would like to share with our consumers, but we have a very small space. And what can we do about it? The QR codes are the answer, and I will show you why in the next slide. But before doing that, I would like to give you a background of QR codes, some piece of history about them. So they were invented in 1994 to keep track of Toyota car parts. And I can say that it's a pretty old technology. And the following years, they spread all over the world, but we actually didn't see many of them. But almost 30 years later, we started to see this, then these, and then these. And today I can say that everyone knows what a QR code is and how to scan it. So in this slide, I would like to highlight a difference between the barcode and the QR codes. Let's take this line from Hamlet as an example. And you can see here how this line looks like on a barcode. And below, we can see how it looks like on a QR code. Even if these two codes contain the same amount of information, we can notice that the QR code can stay much smaller. We can also take this a step further, and we can upload the entire play of Hamlet on a website. We can take the link of this website, and we can put this link on a QR code. This is why we can say that QR codes are efficient, because they can virtually hold any amount of information. They can stay small, and they can save paper. They are also convenient because it's almost at zero added cost to integrate a QR code on a packaging. And they're flexible because you can change the content with dynamic QR codes. You can change the content at any time. Maybe you want to upload a new image of your product, you want to upload a new video, you want to change with more precise information about your supply chain. This is always possible, even if you already print the QR code and even if your product is already on the market. And this is a pretty common scenario in the food industry. So, but there is another problem now. The change isn't always a good thing because, for example, we don't want traceability data being changed by a bad faith producer, for example. And this can become a huge problem in the long term. And what can we do to fight this? Here is where blockchain comes into play. The blockchain is a great technology that allows to store the data in an immutable and permanent way. These data are always available by anyone, and using blockchain technology in general in the food industry is a good way to create trust between producers and consumers. And this is also part of what we do as QualityChain to help food and drink companies become more transparent toward their customers. And our mission, the mission of QualityChain, is to enable all the producers to give as much information as possible in the most easy and transparent way to understand for the consumers. And linked to that, I would like to, at the start of the presentation, we talk about two different problems. And the first one was the space problem that we actually solved the QR codes. And the second one is how much can be hard to provide information to the consumers in an easy way. With QualityChain, we use modularity of information. We basically use these expandable cards that allow the consumers to choose in which aspects of the product they are more interested in. And this is also great for the companies because we can gather data about the anonymous data, of course, about the people who scan the QR code. And this data can be very useful to improve the communication strategy, the marketing strategy, and everything else that is connected with the development of the product. So QualityChain is one of the partners of the Titan project that is a Horizon project, like you know, that put together 27 partners from 14 countries. And our goal is to improve and innovate the food system to make it more fair, more healthy, and more sustainable. As QualityChain, we're leading on to different pilots. The first one is about the development of a blockchain traceability system for SMEs, which is affordable, easy to use, and standalone. Because one of the biggest problem of the traceability system, the blockchain traceability system that are on the market, is that often they need to be integrated with pre-existing software. And this could be a good, very hard. So our goal is to create something that works and that doesn't need to be integrated with anything. We are focused on the supply chain of olive oil, wine, and wheat. The second pilot we are working on is the creation of a new generation of QR codes that use two different technologies, steganography and AI. So we will use AI to embed images inside the QR codes, like you can see in this example here. And our goal is to make these QR codes aesthetically pleasing. And secondly, we will use steganography, which is a technique that allows to store and hide secret data inside the QR codes, which are only available by using a special scanner. And this can prevent malicious actors from falsifying a product. In this way, you just can't just print a QR code and put it on a fake product. And the counterfeiting problem in general in the food industry is a huge problem that affects the sector and costs billions each year. So that's it. These are my contacts. And I hope that you enjoy the presentation, and thank you for your attention. Now I try to stop the sharing. Okay. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Very clear. And we can see that the startups we have in the project, that they're more experienced to pitch, to give short presentations instead of long ones. So it's you really nicely stayed within time. So then I've seen that Blade has connected again. So hopefully he will be able to share the screen now.
Yes, let's try a second time. Okay, share screen. No. You don't see it, I'm guessing.
Can you send it to Andrea, your presentation?
Yes, I will.
If you want, Blade, just send it to me and I'm going to share it so that you can speak on it.
Let me do that.
in the meantime, I see that we have Dushan also in the webinar.
It's on the way.
And we know that the deadline for the open call was the 1st of December, so it is now closed. Can you give a very short update, maybe Dushan, about the status? Is that possible for you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Edward. As Edward has said, the deadline for our open call has concluded last Fridays, and we have received quite a lot of applications, very interesting ones, in fact. And yesterday we have organized a briefing session for the external evaluators, so we can expect to get the result of their evaluations in next 2 weeks or so.
I don't know how much you can share, but I understood.
Not a lot.
Not a lot, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Then we have to wait for the presentation to arrive in the mailbox of Andrea.
30 seconds, I'm there.
I think you've got it.
Yeah. Getting there.
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. I'll just say it next, and you can be my live clicker.
Perfect. I'll do that.
All right. Hi everyone. I'm not sure if I've met everyone on this call, but I'm Blade, and as Edward said, I'm in South Africa at the moment, Cape Town. I was in Holland last week, and I left just as the snow started coming down, and I came here to hot and sunny Cape Town. So I'm really loving it here. We're Open Food Chain. We're part of Titanium Work Package 4 and 5. So 4 being the olive oil traceability, and then 5 being the shrimp production traceability. And I'm going to be talking to you about the EU Deforestation Regulation, just keeping it brief, and explaining how we can, we're kind of utilizing blockchain to meet the needs of the EU Deforestation Regulation. So Andrea, could you just go to the next slide? Yeah, so I just want to give a bit of agenda. First, I'll explain just what is the EUDR, what does deforestation free mean, the commodity and the product scope that's actually covered. I'll give you the key components, the main actors, the obligations, and then some information requirements and record keeping and the information timeline. You can go next, Andrea. Cool. So now we can get into it. So what is EUDR? So there's 2 specific goals of the EUDR. Now, the first one is to minimize consumption. So they want to minimize consumption that's specifically coming from the products that are associated with deforestation and forest degradation. And they also want to increase the EU demand for legal products that are coming from EU deforestation-free and degradation-free areas. Yeah, perfect. So the next slide is what is deforestation free exactly, just so you can get a better understanding. Well, it specifically means that the relevant products either contain or have been fed with or have been used using specific commodities that were produced on land that has not been subject to deforestation after the 31st of December 2020. And if it's a specific wood product, the forest must have been harvested without inducing forest degradation after December 31st, 2020. Next slide, please. Now, there's a specific commodity scope that this EUDR regulation focuses on. So they've outlined that as wood, beef, palm oil, soy, coffee, and cacao. And now, I mentioned the commodity scope here, but in the next slide, Andrea, I also mentioned the product scope. Now, in the regulation, they've defined it as 2 different things. And these are, I've only listed here 2 product scopes, but it's a very extensive list, and I didn't want to put it in this entire slideshow. But they've done this because, from the commodity basis, you have a cacao farmer, and he needs to meet the regulation, the EUDR regulation. But he's only specifically farming cacao. But you also have the traders that also need to be subject to this regulation, and they could be trading things like cacao butter, olive oil, fat, cacao powder, chocolate. So it's not only the specific commodity that person needs to know. They also need to know, okay, wait, does my product contain this commodity as well? And that's actually why they listed all the products as well in the EU DR regulation. Now, if we go to the next slide, the key components of it is to prohibit the import and export of non-compliant products. It puts due diligence obligations on the traders of the products. So, for example, if I'm a wholesaler and I'm selling to Albert Heijn, a retailer in the Netherlands, and I'm buying, my products from a specific farmer, I need to have due diligence on my supply chain to ensure that, what I'm selling is compliant with the EU Deforestation Regulation. It also puts obligation on the member states, to ensure that there's proper implementation. And more on this later, but it also just it categorizes as implementation of an information system. Now, I will go into that later, but just remember that's quite an important part for later. So that's one of the key components. Next one, please, Andrea. Now, the main actors here is the EU Commission, the member states, the custom authorities, and the industry. And when I say the industry, I mean the operators and the traders within the supply chain. Next one, please. Yeah, one more. Perfect. So now we'll talk about the obligations of the operators. Now, when I specifically say operators, I mean the people who are controlling the commodity, the actual raw material resource. So your cacao farmers, your cattle farmers, all the people on the ground. So there's three main ones on the slide. There's two, but there's three main obligations of them. The first one is all products that they make are going to be prohibited to entering the EU market unless they don't meet the following regulations or the following regulations. So one, they must be deforestation free. So if you remember what I specifically said, deforestation free means they've been produced in accordance with the relevant legislation of that country of production. So it doesn't only specifically speak to deforestation free products, it speaks to many other legal obligations, which we'll get into in the next slide. And they are covered by a due diligence statement. When I say a due diligence statement, I say a statement to say that we are producing on deforestation-free land. And how you obtain that due diligence statement will also be explained a bit later. And the next point is they put them on extreme pressure to ensure that they have due diligence throughout the entire system and processes, not just in their specific point of the supply chain. We can go to the next one. Perfect. Here is quite a, Andrea, I think you can go back one. Yes, sorry, I went too early. Now, when I spoke about those legal requirements, it doesn't, in the regulation, yes, we're looking at deforestation free as well, but it also puts a onus on the legal requirements, such as the land use rights. You have a zoning for, if you have a cacao farm, is that farm zoned for agricultural purposes, or is it zoned for something else, such as residential purposes? So it needs to align with that legal purpose as well. It needs to uphold the human rights, the forest-related regulations, the environmental protection laws, and any labor rights of a specific country or that member state. And these are just a handful of some of the legal requirements, not all of them. Perfect. Now, this is quite an important point. So it specifically states that the operators, so the farmers on the ground, need to establish and keep up to date a due diligence system. Now, again, I'll explain the due diligence system later on, but it's an important part to remember that they need to set up the due diligence system and they need to maintain it. We can go on to the next one. Now we're going to talk about the obligation of the traders. Now, the traders I speak about are, wholesalers, the retailers, such as Albert Heijn. They are the ones I speak about in that supply chain. So the first obligation of them is they must collect and maintain all information of their buyers and suppliers, and we'll get into what that information is in the next slide. They must also keep the reference numbers of the due diligence statements associated with each product batch. They must keep this information for at least 5 years, and they must be able to provide it to any competent authorities going forward. We can go to the next slide there, Andrea. Perfect. So when I spoke about that information requirement, I specifically speak about, there needs to be a description of the product. And what we've seen now in today's terms, when there's a trade name and you only say the trade name, it gets very confusing because every country has a different trade name. So you actually also have to say the scientific name of that product. You need to have the quantity, You have the country of the production, the geolocation of the land, a very important point, the supplier's name, the buyer's name, and any evidence that shows that this product, from a trader's perspective, is deforestation free. And this evidence must be verifiable. It can't just be, here it is, just trust it. And now in the next slide, I'll bring it all together. So I was hoping to have my mouse here to circle some things, but I'll just, in the bottom left-hand section, you'll see we'll start with the operators over here. Now this is bringing it all together. So in the bottom left, we have the operators, which are the farmers. In the middle, we have the information system. This was that specific point where I spoke about that the operators need to set this information system up and maintain this information system. On the top, just above the information system, we have the EU single window for environmental and customs. Now this also under the EUDR allows for the setup of this system. On the right, we have customs, the competent authorities, and the country risk assessment data. So how the flow of information works is the operators, let's say it's a cacao farmer, the operator needs to submit a due diligence statement prior to putting the commodities on the market. So they submit the due diligence statement to the information system that they've set up. They then apply to the EU single window for environmental for customs to apply for free release of free circulation certificate. Now, what the EU single window does is it then has a direct link to your information system. Now, this information system also has a direct link to the competent authorities and country risk assessment data. So what happens is the cacao farmer puts the information on the information system. The competent authorities then, which could be a third-party individual. For example, a third-party individual could be a company that would check a specific area or a polygon to identify if that land is deforestation free. So the competent authorities have direct access. They will pull the information from the due diligence statement and they will do an assessment on it. And they will push information back to the information system. So as we say, verifying that the information is correct, for example, or that land is deforestation free. Then the country risk assessment data will also be pushed to the information system. And what I mean by that is if you had, the Netherlands or you had Spain, they might not have a high risk, as high of a country risk as Colombia or Peru in terms of deforestation free, just because there might be stricter regulations around it or stricter enforcement of those regulations. So those two get pushed back to the information system. Right. So now what happens is the EU single window will then pull that information, the due diligence statement that was pushed by the operator, as well as the competent authority and the country risk data that was also pushed to there based on what the operator put on, and will then send that information to the customs authority. The customs authority will then view all of this information, the verified information, and will either send the EU single window back a certificate that has said, here's your release of free circulation certificate, or they can suspend it. Now, whatever the answer is from the customs authority will then be pushed back to the information system again. So you can imagine that if it's a specific batch, all the information is stored in that information system, including the certificate of free circulation. Now, this is exactly where we're stepping in. So Open Food Chain, we're a blockchain provider. We're doing it into Titan in Work Package 4 and Work Package 5. But we're also part of another initiative called the MiCacao Initiative, or the MiCacao Project, which is specifically looking at the cacao production in Peru and in Colombia. And we effectively are setting up the information system. We are setting up a blockchain environment to be the information system. So the operators, effectively in a very simplified format, will push the information, such as the geolocation of where the farm is, to the information system. The competent authorities will then pull information. When I say competent authorities, there will be a separate company that is checking the specific polygon or the specific area of that georeferencing, looking at satellite imagery, looking at all different data input points, and is then pushing the information back into our blockchain to either verify that it's deforestation free or not deforestation free and not verify this information. But it's not only happening once. This is a constant check. So every 6 months, every 3 months, however much we will set it up, there will be a constant check of information. And because there's a constant free flow of information, there's also the constant free flow of information to the EU single window as well as to the customers. So it's almost like the information is a continually flowing system where it's put on the blockchain infrastructure for anyone to see, that being the customs, the competent authorities, the consumers, the traders that are operating those products, that are buying those products. All of it gets pushed into the one blockchain interface. We can go to the next slide, please, Andrea. So now we're going to speak of the timeline. Now, the timeline for this agreement was set on the 6th of the 12th, 2022, and it comes into play on the first quarter of 2023. Now, all companies except small and micro enterprises have 18 months to comply with the regulation. And all companies that are small as well as micro enterprises, so everyone included, has 24 months to comply with the regulation. Next slide, please. Yeah, and that's it for me. If you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat, because I know Edward wants to share a doc, but I have a very good doc on the EUDR regulation, specifically stating every question you may have. And I promise you it does have every question. And I'd love to share it with you guys. So just let me know if you would like that. Cool. Thanks so much, my live clicker, Andrea.
Okay, thank you very much, Blade. I think we're all looking forward to the information. So when you can put it in the chat, I think it would be nice.
Yeah.
Now the 3 presentations are open for questions. Does anyone have a question for Bert or Ciro or Blade? You can raise your hand. What I noticed in the chat, Bernadette has a question. You can ask it yourself.
Hi, sorry, it's not really a question. It's I attended a presentation by a PhD student earlier in the year, which Suili knows about as well. And they're using like edge technology, and from what I gathered from that, it's like a pretty good way to check photos. It would be very relevant for like the deforestation thing to have the edge technology, because it takes a lot of load off of the system, so that you're using less storage and less computational power, I guess. So I need to contact them for other reasons anyway, but once I reach him, it might be useful for you guys to speak to him as well.
Can you mention the technology again, the name?
I don't know the specific technology anymore. It was edge technology of some sort.
Okay. Yes, please, when you contact them, I think it's always relevant for us to know. Yeah. Blade, have you heard of something like this?
Yeah, well, originally, what his presentation was about detecting how many people were in a photo, and this was traffic related, where they were updating the flow of traffic and how the traffic lights should be synchronized, and to automate that. But that's an awful lot of photos and computing to be doing all the time. So you don't want to take that back to a central server. You want to do it on site and not have to process all of that centrally. So that's basically what they were working on. And it's very relevant for something like deforestation, where you don't want to do all of that on a central hub, because it's a lot of it's a lot of photos.
Yeah, I was listening. Sorry, my computer has issues. I couldn't unmute myself or do the camera, so I left and came back. Yeah, won't you please? You said you were going to contact them. Won't you please just let me know when you do? It would be great to have a chat about that.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Now Itzia has a question.
Hello, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I missed the first webinar, so very, very interesting presentations. I have a question for the first speaker, to Bert, related to the technologies that you presented for portable or inside technologies. In fact, for this nanopore technology, I guess this is the mini ion. the technology for sequencing?
It is indeed, yes, but the novel, the new version of it.
A new version, okay, because I have kind of experience with that, and for my knowledge, it has a very, very expensive consumables that might impact on the cost of the technology. Yes. Have you considered that for your applications, or perhaps the new version has different consumables and different cost?
It's because you can do parallel sequencing. You can do more than one analysis per device. So depending on where you get your nanopore from, the costs are between 750 to, if you negotiate well, down to 500. Now, for a single analysis, that's quite expensive. But if you think that you would probably take many samples, so if you put, for example, let's say 90 samples on the same device, that brings the cost down to close to 1/100 of what it would be if you run one sample. So it doesn't make sense, and I agree with you, if you just have a single sample, unless it's a very urgent case, it's about life and death, or similar situation. But since hardly ever you just have one sample, you go around the factory, you sample from different sites, you're probably running into more samples that you need to analyze on the MinION, and this is really where the cost then becomes a negligible factor in the overall assessment. But I agree that single sample could be a little costly. But then the question is, how much would a laboratory charge? Would the time that you invest sending it to a laboratory be? Is there a cost associated with it, storage cost of the ingredient, the fact that you cannot put it into production? So you have to balance the different cost elements against each other and then decide what is the right technology. In Britain, we have a saying, we say horses for courses. So the right tools for the right questions or the right opportunities. And I think the same applies here.
Yeah, I completely
agree. But thank you for the
so,
question. It's muchas gracias.
The cost depends on the value for the customer. So the urgency of the analysis or wherever, but well,
Absolutamente.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Laurent was waving first, I think. You can ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Thank you to all speakers. Your presentation are really interesting. I had maybe questions for Ciro and Blade. For Blade, I wanted to know what kind of blockchain do you use, if you are working on public blockchains or consortium. And I wanted to know if you plan to store the information on the blockchain, or if you just record footprints on the blockchain. And to Ciro, your idea is to work on the QR code to have a link with the consumers, and I wanted to know if you plan or if you use to collect data about consumers, or just on scans. How far do you go with the connection with the consumer?
Maybe Blake first.
So, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Sorry, I've switched to my phone. I'm tired of my computer. So the first question, yes, we're a permissionless blockchain. We're public. That's what we're building on. We're building industry-specific chains. When I spoke about the Mi Cacao one, it was a specific industry of cacao. We're also starting with a fish chain, for example, so that will be fish related. And your second question, give me for asking. What was your second question again?
If you what kind of information do you, or data do you store on the blockchain?
Yeah. So it's specifically it's with the cacao one that I explained about. We obviously have to follow GDPR standards, so we can't put any private information on there. But if I'm talking on the cacao basis, we store such as the georeferencing of the farm. We have the gender percentage split of the actual organization. Is there fair income to the farmers? It will just be a simple yes or no answer. So it's that type of information that we would store, as well as the previous supplier's information. And if the supplier doesn't want the information to be stored, so we have had an instance where, for example, we work on the fish side. If you have a buyer and you want the buyer to be stored as well on the blockchain, but the buyer doesn't specifically want that company name on there, we can either encrypt it and put it on the blockchain, and only the relevant parties that want to see the information or is allowed to see the information can get the decryption key. Or we just simply categorize the specific buyer, for example, restaurant or hotel, or, so we don't actually give out all that information. So it's really, really case by case information, or industry by industry information. And the industry decides how the blockchain is set up. So on the fish side, the industry will decide what the necessary information that needs to be on the blockchain will be.
Thank you.
Okay,
So,
then Ciro, yeah.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, you asked if we have other interaction with the consumers, and we actually don't have other interaction with the consumers. And for the second question about the data that we can gather with the traceability system, actually we are not gathering data, but with the actual software QualityChain, we can know that, of course, they are all GDPR compliant and aggregated data, and we can know the location, we can know the language, the model of the phone, the smartphone, and we can, with the expandable cards, we can know where they click on the page, so we can track if they are more interested in sustainability instead of ethics or supply chain, for example. Then we create a report of all this data that we gather from the consumers, and we share this data with the producers, and they can use this data like for marketing mainly, but of course also to study the behavior of consumers in general.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
Okay, I saw Francois waving, so I hope he still has a question. Francois, are you still there? Because I don't know if anyone else has a question.
Yes, Edouard, I have one question.
Okay.
It's for Blade. You are providing a blockchain for this deforestation compliance for your producers, but the thing is, for instance, for the cows, they are also concerned by different other compliance requests at the European Union. Do you expect to provide an overall system where all the compliance can be checked, or is it just in your mind for the deforestation-free certificate, and for additional certificates we have to use another information systems, because sometimes farmers find that it's very overloaded to have to provide same data to several systems for various certifications just to sell one product.
Yeah, so to answer your question very simply, we're actually partnering with a farm management app system. So we're developing the blockchain to, yes, meet the EU DR specification. However, we're not only going to be doing that. We are also creating a place where farmers can store all their certifications on it. But we're just building it in a way that it meets the EU DR regulations at the same time. So no, we will not. We definitely do not expect farmers to use our system and then use plenty others as well.
Okay, thank you.
The reason that I asked Blade to present this is a conversation I had with Karen Constable. She's also on our stakeholder board. She's in Australia. She's an expert in food fraud and food safety. And we were in contact with the FDA before about their food safety law. And for them, it's already a big step, because they want every let's say, player in the food supply chain to be responsible for their step in the supply chain. So when there is an issue in the supply chain with food safety, the FDA can ask to business operators, oh, can you give us information where you source the ingredients? They have to go one step back. But then the FDA has to go to the next company and ask them the same question on and on until they are at the beginning. And what Karen said is so special about the EU Deforestation Act is that they force the player at the end of the supply chain to be responsible for the entire one, so to have it all mapped. And that is a big difference. And that puts, you could say, much more responsibility on the shoulders of the companies and also on the organizations that support them, like Open Food Chain that Blade is representing. And I think there are similarities with the Due Diligence Supply Chain Act. I think that's already in place in Germany, where let's say retailers can also be responsible for the entire history of their products. So it's coming up more and more, and it would make a lot of sense to me when there could be one system that let's say a player in the supply chain is using, so that they could answer all these requests. And at least it would be clever for me, because otherwise you indeed for different regulations you need to have different systems in place.
Yeah. So
anything to add, Blade?
No, Edward, I think you've summed it up perfectly, as always.
Okay. No, please. Okay, then I have another question for Bert, which is a bit related about the costs, because when your presentation finished, there was some discussion about the costs of those portable devices. Maybe you can give a little bit more information about it. You're muted. Okay.
I just realized a nice thing about Teams is it tells you that you're on mute if you pay attention. Anyway, so there are of course different levels of devices, and I saw that TelSpec was mentioned, so that's the device of Isabel Hoffman, who previously she's the CEO and founder of TelSpec, and she was based in Canada. Now I believe she's based in Portugal now, also tapping into EU money. So Antonio asked the question, and indeed, when you compare the SIO, that was the first device. It was Dror Sharon's company from Israel, and I said already, they moved to California, was brought to the market. That was kind of a total novelty, and they used it for identifying not only fake food, but also, and in particular, if you have a white pill on your table, what is that white pill? Is that a headache pill, or is that something for your blood pressure? So that was actually able to identify different types of pharmaceuticals, small range. And then we had Isabel coming out, and of course, the two were competing in the same market for consumer devices, and they were trying to sell at the same price. But the problem was that Isabel used the Texas Instruments sensor, which has a wider range, so it's a little bit more sensitive. You can do a little bit more with it, but of course, it comes at a totally different cost. So the sensor itself is around $1,000 US. So the device is $1.5K. And of course, for consumers, $1.5K compared to the SIO sensor is basically a completely different world for consumers, if that is really for consumer use. So now both companies are moving into slightly different parts. And by the way, Isabel also has an article in that special section. So if the QR code that you saw on the slide, there is an article on fish authenticity. And basically, now the SIO device is more on the feed market. So they've gone to bed, in inverted commas, with the big players, the Cargills, for example, that have farms, subcontracting farms, where they measure, for example, the nutritional composition of animal feed in a cup. So that device from point and shoot for consumers, now it's, by the way, it's white, it's no longer gray. They also have a second device on the market, which is simply a cup where you scoop the animal feed, and then it measures in the cup what you have in there. So that's quite a nice development. But what we're seeing here with the devices is no matter which one you take, it's also very much dependent on the algorithm. So when the melamine crisis arose, we're using NIR and FTIR sensors to look at if they could pick up melamine, and they couldn't with the original algorithms that were in place. But what was possible after they changed the algorithm was that they actually specifically determined melamine. Now, if one is more sensitive or the other one is a little less sensitive there, melamine is a concern at pretty much any level. So I guess it's anybody's choice to choose one over the other sensor. The phaser that I showed, that is being used by major companies, also in the food business, for screening incoming raw materials. So it's not necessarily new technology. It's new in terms of food fraud detection, but it's not new in terms of quality control, because you can determine protein content, sugar content, fatty acids composition, and so on. So there are a couple of factors that have already been used by major food operators, usually global food operators, for screening routinely their incoming raw material to make sure that is compliant with their specification. But now the use has expanded to specifically also target particular food adulterants. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know, Antonio, if you want to add something, because you just put a new method on the chat.
No, I agree with Bert. I mean, I had some experience with Telspec because we worked in the same project about food fish identification. And yeah, I mean, I got the sensor for free, so I know it's very expensive. And but for sure, I mean, I was surprised for the first time that I saw it. It was something like magical. It seems it comes from Star Trek. And we use it to measure microbial contamination on fish fillets, which is it's quite a weird parameter for infrared. And actually, I mean, it cannot, of course, cannot measure the exact number of microbes, but it can give a rough estimation of a sample which is heavily contaminated or not so heavily contaminated. So it can be useful for something that you get in 30-second analysis. So it's amazing. And just recently, I got in contact with this new spin-off company from the University of Eindhoven. They're working on portable near spectrometer, and I know that they want to develop also application for food. I don't think they have products already available, but so probably we're gonna have a competitor of Telspec and Shio soon, hopefully. And
they seem from Bayer. There's a spin-off company from Bayer Leverkusen that has also a double sensor that is a notch above the rest. So we'll see quite a bit of development in that area. I think what we have to bear in mind is that the sensitivity that you get with any of the NIR sensors is somewhat limited. So if you start trying to detect food allergens, which are, in the ppm range, you might not be successful with the current technology, or low levels of pesticide. Just to give you another example, NIR probably wouldn't be giving you any signal. But if you used another technology, for example, SCRS, so that would be much more sensitive. And therefore, it's always a question which technology is the best for the level of contamination that you're using and for the type of product that you're using. So when you look at the like SCRS part of Raman, and NIR is basically a different technology. So when you have, for example, powders and pills, NIR is perfect. For biofilms, SCRS might be the better technology compared to NIR. So you need to know which technology to deploy for which type of matrix or which type of question. I think that's always the critical point.
Okay, thank you very much. I have another question for Ciro, because you mentioned what you can offer to let's say smaller companies, and when I think about this, I also see a link with tourism. When you talk about these small producers, that they maybe could receive some groups of tourists to explain and show what they do and sell some more product. because then you will not only tell the story of one company, but you can tell the story of the region and the different companies active in that region. How do you see this? Do you have any ideas about this?
Yes, we actually already did a pilot project with a consortium here in Italy, the Alto Piemonte consortium, and we linked basically the product with the territory. So the people who scanned the QR code of these 30 wines that participate in the project, they can the people who scan the QR code can see the supply chain, the story of the product, and everything about the company. But they were also invited to take another action on the territory. For example, like a visit to the vineyard and all the everything that the producers can offer to the consumers beside the buying of the wine. So yeah, it's a great way to involve the consumers to take other action on the territory of the product, all the products in general.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other question in the audience? I can see that also Helder Pereira made a remark in the chat. I think he's quite interested in blockchain. I don't know if you want to explain your interest or you want to ask a question.
Thank you. I wasn't gonna say anything in particular because I'm actually moving as my camera is off. But I noticed that all that data that you're talking about, that legal relevance, and the interesting choice of putting it on the blockchain, similar to what also ourselves and other people in a project called Planet, we also did for legally relevant logistics data, such as, for example, where a product has passed geolocation data. So I thought that was an interesting similarity, and that's my comment there. But I wasn't thinking on saying anything beyond these. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much. When there are no other questions?
Yes, there was a question from Anaya, and I wasn't quite sure which paper she's referring to. I shared a bunch of papers, so I don't know. I can I'll give you a copy of those slides with a QR code, so Edward can distribute them later, so you can download the paper with a QR code or the title.
Oh, okay.
Search for the title.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks. I can't remember the name of the paper at the moment.
Do you know the title? What was it about?
It was quite a few authors on there from the, I think from the consortium you mentioned, and before I could get
that is inauthenticity. I don't know how much longer we stay, Edward, but I can see if we can share that in the chat if we keep the audience busy for 2 more minutes.
I think it was the paper with Ernest Teijen as a co-author. That's what I remember with a lot of authors.
That was the one on the rise, but the inauthenticity
it was definitely
yeah.
It was only not inauthenticity, which is why I was interested.
No, that was the paper, the ILC paper. Give me a second and I'll share that in the chat.
Yeah. Then I'll just thank you all very much for listening in, participating, asking questions. We hope this webinar was useful to you. What we try is always to combine the 3 different key expertise areas that we have. So there's not an automatic link between the 3 presentations, but we're all focusing on a more sustainable food system. And it appeared that blockchain came up in all the 3 presentations, so there was a connection. As Dushan said, the reviewers will be working very hard in the coming time to look at the different proposals that came in for the open call. On 8th February, there will be another workshop for the stakeholder board. And then the new pilots that are selected will be presented. They will present themselves to you. So we think that's quite an interesting event that is upcoming. And we hope very soon, hopefully this week, the new newsletter and the new PDF will come out. You will become notified. And then on the 5th of March, we have another webinar with 3 new speakers. So I thank you all very much for your attention and your presence, and looking forward to see you again, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.